Welcome to UG Chapters of English affiliated to BCU, 2nd Sem BA. The Fly, written by Catherine Mansfield. Source, Resonance, BCU, 2nd Sem BA. Before we start the chapter, let's know more about the author. Catherine Mansfield was born on 1888 and died on 1922. Was born in Wellington, New Zealand. She is known for her short stories and poems. Her most popular stories are The Garden Party, A Dill Pickle, Mr. and Mrs. Dove, and The Fly. Mansfield's health began to decline just as her work started receiving international attention. Some of her poems are A Little Boy's Dream, Butterfly Laughter, Fairy Tale, etc. Despite her health, she published two major collections, Bliss in 1920 and The Garden Party in 1922. During her writing career, Mansfield was incredibly inspired by the works of Oscar Wilde and Anton Chekhov. Mansfield's creative years were burdened with loneliness, illness, jealousy, alienation, all of which is reflected in her work. Mansfield depicted trivial events and subtle changes in human behavior. The Fly brings out the polarity between the boss and his friend's reaction towards the loss of their sons in the First World War. It highlights the long-term repercussions that war can have on the psyche of the near ones of the departed. It unravels the futile and persistent efforts of the individuals to survive during the war. The pen and the ink symbolize the whims of man, leaders to victimize the innocent soldiers at their discretion during the world wars. Pre-reading activity. Name some of the wars fought in the world. Discuss consequences of the two world wars. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? How has it affected the people? Has time helped them to overcome the grief? Try to answer these questions, and right now we are also fighting a war of COVID-19 pandemic. And wars never bring anything good along with them. There is always destruction, and destruction. Ponder over these questions to find the answers. And I hope you would have definitely studied about World War II and Hiroshima and Nagasaki incidences in your high schools. What is the symbolism of the lesson? The fly symbolizes helplessness of man before fate. Man may try hard to escape his death, but he is not given a chance to escape. Just like the fly, man tries hard and gets out of the grip of death for the time being, but fate again captures him. He has no power to defy fate and fall an easy prey to it. When we read the story, we find that the writer and all the characters in the story stand for the fly. The theme of the lesson. The Fly is about the conquest of time over grief. This is the first theme of the story. To show that time conquers grief, the writer presents two characters, Mr. Woodyfield and his ex-boss. Both of them lost their only son 6 years ago. It was a long period and it had healed up their grief. The second theme of the story, The Fly, is as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods. They kill us for their sport. When we read the story carefully, we find that the fly in the story symbolizes helplessness of man before fate. Just like the fly, man tries hard and gets out of the grip of death for the time being. But fate captures him again. Man has no power to defy fate and fall an easy prey to it. When we read the story, we find that the writer and all the characters in the story stand for the fly. Definitely, we would have experienced one of these incidences in our life. When we try to escape something, it catches us very badly. Resonance Page 46. We are very snug in here, piped old Mr. Woodfield, and peered out of the great green leather armchair by his friend the boss's desk as a baby peers out of his pram. His talk was over. It was time for him to be off, but he did not want to go, since he had retired since his stroke. The wife and the girls kept him boxed up in the house every day of the week except Tuesday. On Tuesday he was dressed and brushed and allowed to cut back to the city for the day, though what he did there the wife and girls couldn't imagine. Made a nuisance of himself to his friends, they supposed. Well, perhaps so. All the same, we cling to our last pleasures of the tree clings to its last leaves. So there sat old Woodfield, smoking a cigar and staring almost greedily at the boss, who rolled in his office chair, stout, rosy, 5 years older than he, and still going strong, still at the helm. It did one good to see him. Wistfully, admiringly, the old voice added, "It's snug in here, upon my word." "Yes, it's comfortable enough," agreed the boss, and he flipped the Financial Times with a paper knife. As a matter of fact, he was proud of his room. He liked to have it admired, especially by old Woodfield. It gave him a feeling of deep, solid satisfaction to be planted there in the midst of it, in full view of that frail old figure in the muffler. "I have had it done up lately," he explained, as he had explained for the past how many weeks. "New carpet," and he pointed out to the bright red carpet with a pattern of large white rings. "New furniture," and he nodded towards the massive bookcase and the table with legs like twisted tracale. "Electric heating." He waved almost exultantly towards the 5 transparent pearly sausages glowing softly in the tilted copper pan. But he did not draw old Woodfield's attention to the photograph over the table of a grave-looking boy in uniform standing in one of those spectral photographers' park with photographers' storm clouds behind him. It was not new. It had been there for over 6 years. "There was something I wanted to tell you," said old Woodfield, and his eyes grew dim, remembering. "Now, what was it? I had it in my mind when I started out this morning." His hands began to tremble and patches of red showed above his beard. "Poor old chap, he is on his last pins, though," thought the boss. And feeling kindly, he winked at the old man and said jokingly, "I tell you what, I have got a little drop of something here that will do you good before you go out into the cold again. It's beautiful stuff. It wouldn't hurt a child." He took a key off his watch chain, unlocked a cupboard below his desk, and drew forth a dark, squat bottle. "That's the medicine," said he, "and the man from whom I got it told me on the strict it came from the cellars at Windsor Castle." Old Woodfield's mouth fell open at the sight. He couldn't have looked more surprised if the boss had produced a rabbit. "It's whiskey, ain't it?" he piped feebly. The boss turned the bottle and lovingly showed him the label. Whiskey it was. "Do you remember?" said he. "Do you know?" said he, peering up at the boss wonderingly. "They won't let me touch it at home," and he looked as though he was going to cry. "Ha! That's where we know a bit more than the ladies," cried the boss, swooping across from 2 tumblers that stood on the table with the water bottle and pouring a generous finger into each. "Drink it down, it will do you good, and don't put any water with it. It's scurrilous to tamper with stuff like this." Ha! He pulled out his handkerchief, hastily wiped his moustaches, and cocked an eye at old Woodfield, who was rolling his in his chaps. The old man swallowed, was silent a moment, and then said faintly, "It's nutty." But it warmed him. It crept into his chill old brain, he remembered. "That was it," he said, heaving himself out of his chair. I thought you'd like to know. The girls were in Belgium last week having a look at poor Reggie's grave, and they happened to come across your boys. They are quite near each other, it seems. Old Woodfield paused, but the boss made no reply. Only a quiver in his eyelids showed that he heard. The girls were delighted with the way the place is kept, piped the old voice. Beautifully looked after. Couldn't be better if they were at home. You have not been across, have you? No, no. For various reasons, the boss had not been across. There's miles of it, queried old Woodfield, and it's all as neat as a garden. Flowers growing on all the graves, nice broad paths. It was plain from his voice how much he liked a nice broad path. The pause came again. Then the old man brightened wonderfully. Do you know what the hotel made the girls pay for a pot of jam? He piped. 10 francs. Robbery, I call it. It was a little pot, so Gertrude says, no bigger than a half-crown, and she hadn't taken more than a spoonful when they charged her 10 francs. Gertrude brought the pot away with her to teach them a lesson. Quite right, too. It's trading on our feelings. They think because we are over there having a look around, we are ready to pay anything. That's what it is. And he turned towards the door. Quite right, cried the boss. Although what was quite right, he hadn't the last or least idea. He came around by his desk, followed the shuffling footsteps to the door, and saw the old fellow out. Woodfield was gone. For a long moment the boss stayed staring at nothing, while the grey-haired office messenger watching him dodged in and out of his cubby-hole like a dog that expects to be taken for a run. Then I'll see nobody for half an hour, Mackay, said the boss. Understand, nobody at all. Very good, sir. The door shut, the firm heavy steps recrossed the bright carpet, the fat body plumped down in the spring chair, and leaning forward, the boss covered his face with his hands. He intended it. He arranged to weep. It had been a terrible shock to him when old Woodfield sprang that remark upon him about the boy's grave. It was exactly as though the earth had opened and he had seen the boy lying there with Woodfield's girls staring down at him. For it was strange. Although over 6 years had passed away, the boss never thought of the boy except as lying unchanged, unblemished in his uniform, asleep forever. My son, groaned the boss, but no tears came yet. In the past, in the first 3 months and even years after the boy's death, he had only to say those words to be overcome by such grief that nothing short of a violent fit of weeping could relieve him. Time, he had declared then, he had told everybody could make no difference. Other men perhaps might recover, might live their lost on, but not he. How was it possible? His boy was the only son. Ever since his birth, the boss had worked at building up his business. This business for him, it had no other meaning if it was not for the boy. Life itself had come to have no other meaning. How on earth could he have slaved, denied himself, kept going all those years without the promise for ever before him on the boy stepping into his shoes and carrying on where he left off? And that promise had been so near being fulfilled. The boy had been in the office learning the ropes for a year before the war. Every morning they had started off together. They had come back by the same train, and what congratulations he had received as the boy's father. No wonder he had taken to it marvelously. As to his popularity with the staff, every man, jack of them, down to old Massey, couldn't make enough of the boy, and he wasn't in the least spoiled. No, he was just his bright natural self, with the right word for everybody, with that boyish look and his habit of saying simply splendid. But all that was over and done with as though it never had been. The day had come when Mackay had handed him the telegram that brought the whole place crashing about his head. Deeply regret to inform you, and he had left the office a broken man with his life in ruins. 6 years ago. 6 years. How quickly time passed. It might have happened yesterday. The boss took his hands from his face. He was puzzled. Something seemed to be wrong with him. He wasn't feeling as he wanted to feel. He decided to get up and have a look at the boy's photograph, but it wasn't a favorite photograph of his. The expression was unnatural. It was cold, even stern looking. The boy had never looked like that. At that moment, the boss noticed that a fly had fallen into his broad ink pot and was trying to feebly and desperately to clamber out again. Help, help, said those struggling legs, but the sides of the ink pot were wet and slippery. It fell back again and began to swim. The boss took up a pen, picked the fly out of the ink and shook it onto a piece of blotting paper. For a fraction of a second it lay still on the dark patch that oozed round it. Then the front legs waved, took hold, and pulling its small, sodden body up, it began the immense task of cleaning the ink from its wings. Over and under went a leg along a wing, as the stone goes over and under the skid. Then there was a pause while the fly, seeming to stand on the tips of its toes, tried to expand first one wing and then the other. It succeeded at last, and sitting down, it began, like a minute cat, to clean its face. Now one could imagine that the little front legs rubbed against each other lightly, joyfully. The horrible danger was over. It had escaped. It was ready for life again. But just then the boss had an idea. He plunged his pen back into the ink, leaned his thick wrist on the blotting paper, and as the fly tried its wing down, came a great heavy blot. What would it make of that? What indeed? The little beggar seemed absolutely cowed, stunned, and afraid to move because of what could have happened next. But then, as if painfully, it dragged itself forward. The front legs waved, caught hold, and more slowly this time the task began from the beginning. He is a plucky little devil, thought the boss, and he felt a real admiration for the fly's courage. That was the way to tackle things. That was the right spirit. Never say die. It was only a question of. But the fly had again finished its laborious task, and the boss had just time to refill its pen, to shake fair and square on the new clean body at another dark spot. What about it this time? A painful moment of suspense followed, but behold, the front legs were again waving. The boss felt a rush of relief. He leaned over the fly and said to it tenderly, "You artful little bee." And he actually had the brilliant notion of breathing on it to help the drying process. All the same, there was something timid and weak about its efforts now, and the boss decided that this time should be the last. As he dipped the pen deep into the ink pot, it was. The last blot fell on the soaked blotting paper, and the dragonfly lay in it and did not stir. The back legs were stuck to the body, the front legs were not to be seen. "Come on," said the boss, "look up sharp." And he stirred it with his pen in vain. Nothing happened, or was likely to happen. The fly was dead. The boss lifted the corpse of the end of the paper knife and flung it into the waste paper basket, but such a grinding feeling of wretchedness seized him that he felt positively frightened. He started forward and pressed the bell for Macrae. "Bring me some fresh blotting paper," he said sternly, "and look sharp about it." And while the old dog padded away, he fell to wondering what it was he had been thinking about before. What was it? He took out his handkerchief and passed it inside his collar. For the life of him, he could not remember. So, what's the summary? The story Fly throws light on the fact that time is a great healer and it conquers grief. Mr. Woodfield comes to see his ex-boss. He is retired and is a heart patient. He praises the new setting and furniture of the office. Then the boss offers him whiskey. After drinking it, Mr. Woodfield remembers what he has forgotten. He tells the boss that his daughters have visited the graves of the bosses as well as Mr. Woodfield's son. Actually, they have died in a war. When Mr. Woodfield field has gone, the boss remembers his dead son. He tries to have the same feelings of grief as he felt on the day of his death. However, he fails. For the last try, he decides to go to the photograph of his son, but a fly in an ink pot attracts his attention. He forgets all about his son. He takes the fly out of the ink pot and puts it on a blotting paper. As soon as the fly is about to fly, he drops a drop of ink on it and enjoys its struggle. At last, the fly dies of drops of ink. The boss throws it away and orders for a fresh blotting paper. Then he tries to remember what he was thinking before attending to the fly. It means he forgets his dead son again. Source: Blogspot website and ebook prescribed by Bangalore University. I hope you all agree that time is a healer. Time heals the wounds, and time gives us enough to think and imagine our life. After all, memories is all about life. So try to understand the lesson and try to imagine how the pain would have been for the father. So just try to enjoy the lesson as well.